welcome everyone. I see a lot of welcomes in the chat. Thank you. We'll do this in English because we have seen that quite some participants are from other countries and also interested in what is happening in Belgium. I'd like to introduce you to Ellen Cortvriend, who helps us with this webinar, who is from PricewaterhouseCoopers and has a lot of knowledge, of course, on the Belgium mandate because she's in the country itself. And I'm from Storecove. My name is Dolf Kars, and I will tell you after Ellen did her part of the presentation a bit more about the solution that Storecove offers and where we're at as a service provider. So once again, welcome everyone. And Ellen, I want to give the floor to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, also from my side. Let me, in the meantime, pull up the slides for the session. So as Dolf mentioned, my name is Ellen. I'm a partner in the Belgian practice of PwC. And leading the Center of Excellence that we have on global e-invoicing and e-reporting. So I'm indeed following very closely what is happening in Belgium with the upcoming mandates, but also in other jurisdictions worldwide. So if there would be any questions, please make this a bit interactive. We had a similar session somewhere in June, which was super interactive. So I hope this one can be the same. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to raise them as part of the webinar. What I will do, because you will see that content-wise, I will focus on, of course, the main rules, the main requirements under the upcoming mandate. I will also make some highlights on changes that happened between the previous webinar that we did and currently, because what did change from a regulatory perspective in the meantime is that Belgium also published a royal decree, just clarifying a number of aspects that are relevant for all of you in terms of a compliance implementation. Maybe kick it off with some background. It's clear Belgium is not alone with its e-invoicing initiative, with the mandate that is upcoming. We basically see this trend from all sides of the world already happening for many years. You see that currently we have already 80 countries worldwide that have implemented either mandatory e-invoicing, real-time reporting, or another type of transaction-based reporting mechanism, with also more than 70 new obligations that are already on the horizon. So a lot is happening, and Belgium is definitely not alone with its initiative. To make that a bit more granular, I've also re-included this slide, which gives you a bit of an overview, a timeline of what to expect in the next couple of years, where you see that many European jurisdictions are also moving to similar mandates. Same is happening in some other regions in the world. Think about the Middle Eastern region, for instance, where a lot of the middle or GCC countries basically are also moving towards mandatory e-invoicing. And I think an important aspect also to consider when thinking about the Belgian mandate is that the EU is also taking a specific initiative called VIDA, VAT in the digital age. And basically what VIDA does or entails is that it will make e-invoicing mandatory, a mandatory process, a default process for all intra-community transactions by July 2030. Intra-community, yes, but with this, they are also hoping to basically set the standard for domestic e-invoicing as well, which would mean that there is a bit of an impact to the current fragmentation that we see on the market, knowing that currently every country is taking its own initiative, its own specific format, its own specific way of transmitting e-invoices, which of course is quite cumbersome for businesses to adhere to, and of course also for service providers to make sure that they have a proper solution that can deal with each and every different system. So some harmonization, let's say, on European level, but of course also a big change, knowing that this will create a further acceleration of the number of new requirements that will pop up in the next couple of years. And it's basically also in that spirit that Belgium is coming up with its e-invoicing mandates. What are now the rules in a nutshell. Well, first of all, I hope you all remember the timing of the mandate. So 1st of January 2026, not that far away from us anymore. Then the mandate will kick off in a big bang approach, meaning that Belgium has not taken a phased implementation as some other countries do, but they will really go big bang with their initiative for all companies, irrespective of size, irrespective of industry. Everyone will be affected, both from an AP and an AR perspective. They've also put forward PEPL as the default standard for the exchange of structured electronic invoices. However, there is some flexibility, and I will talk a bit more about that later on. In case you have an agreement from your supplier or buyer in order to deviate from the PEPL system. However, it's clear that issuing of PDF invoices, for instance, will no longer be acceptable for all those transactions that fall in scope of the e-invoicing mandates. This is the first step of the process. So Belgium will focus first on the introduction of e-invoicing. Over time, and currently the timing will be January 2028, they also want to introduce mandatory e-reporting on top of that. I will also explain a bit more in detail how that model could look like, because the rules around that mechanism are not yet in place. And then, as a side remark, there are also certain incentives given from a direct tax perspective, mainly for the SME market, to make sure that you can cope with the additional costs that, of course, the change towards e-invoicing will entail. I talked about the scope of the obligation, so a very broad scope. You see that 99.5% of the Belgian VAT-registered entities will be in scope, according to the authorities. So it means that both the bakery around the corner, but also multinational giants, they will all be affected by the new rules. And basically what is defining is really the fact that you are established as a supplier or buyer in Belgium, and that your transaction in scope is a transaction that in scope of the Belgian invoicing rules. So for these types of transactions, the mandate will be applicable. If they're exempt from VAT, they're typically outside scope of the e-invoicing mandates. I see that my line is rather slow. I hope. Let me put my camera off just to make sure that there's no impact on the sound quality. Can you still hear me, Dolf? Can you confirm?
We can hear you properly, so you don't have to switch the video off so far.
Okay, perfect. I saw some delay on my side and only. All right. Continuing on the scope, so what is not in scope of the upcoming mandates that are cross-border transactions? So let's say as a Belgian company, you're sending an invoice to a customer in France. This one will not be in scope of the mandates, as well as B2C transactions. So if you are sending an invoice to a private individual, even if you're obliged for that transaction to indeed send an invoice, it will not be in scope of the invoicing obligation. So it really focuses on B2B. For B2G aspects, so the business to government invoicing, that is already, I would say, a long-standing process whereby indeed also specific digital invoicing rules need to be followed. Does it mean that in this example that I gave, whereby you as a Belgian company are sending an invoice to a French company, this is not in scope of the mandate per se? Am I then not able to send my invoice voluntary over PEPL? Yes, you are. You can still voluntarily opt for e-invoicing also for this scenario. But the difference is that in this case, you need to have the customer's acceptance in order to do so. So that is basically the difference. But if your client is accepting to receive your invoices also over PEPL, even not in scope of the mandate, that is, of course, perfectly fine. I talked about the scope from, I would say, an entity perspective. I also already talked a bit about the transactions that are part of the scope. I think here an important one to remember, and that changed a bit from the initial legislation that the Belgian government has published, is that those companies that from a recipient perspective, from an AP perspective, are VAT registered in Belgium but not established in Belgium, these ones will not be in the scope of the mandate. So initially it was the intention that those companies only having, let's say a French company having a Belgian VAT registration number, that they should also be able to ingest Peppol invoices going forward for those transactions in scope of the mandate. This has now been clarified that in first instance, those transactions fall outside of the scope of the mandate. This may change again over time once e-reporting is indeed introduced in Belgium. I talked about the dual track approach already very shortly. So I talked about the fact that Peppol will become the default standard, and I'm sure that Dolf will explain later on when he explains about the Storecove solution much more detail around how Peppol functions. But Peppol, that one will be the default process. However, businesses are able to opt out from Peppol in case, let's say, you have already a long existing relationship with a supplier or buyer to exchange electronic data interchange documents, EDI documents. In this case, the Belgian government gives you the possibility to opt out from using Peppol and to stick to your existing process. If you have, first of all, the agreement of your supplier or customer to do so. And secondly, if indeed the format that you're using is interoperable, is compliant with the European norm, the EN 16931 standard for electronic invoicing. An important clarification that was given in the Royal Decree when it was published is the fact that the formats that you're using, that it needs to be converted to one of the formats complying with the European norm before sending out the invoice to the buyer. So where you could say, well, if I'm able, once I received a specific document, to convert it into an EN compliant format, now it has been clarified that that process, that conversions should already be happening before sending of the invoice. What is also important is that even under the opt-out possibility, let's say you agree with all your suppliers, with all your buyers, that you will not be using Peppol for the exchange of invoices and the receipt of invoices, that even in that scenario, you should be technically capable of connecting to the Peppol network in order to receive and exchange electronic documents. So that is also a clarification that was given by the Royal Decree, the fact that they require that technical capability to send invoices over Peppol BIS, because of course there may be cases where your suppliers or buyers indeed want to reach you over the Peppol network. What is now the pro and con of this opt-out possibility? Yeah, and it is, of course, a pro that you can stick to your existing processes if you would already have that in place, protect your existing investments, it's noted here. It is some flexibility in case Peppol does not provide a response to all your business needs. You don't have to make changes. However, the con is clearly that you need to have an agreement per trading partner, supplier or buyer, if you want to go for that opt-out. And then also, what will happen in case the e-reporting requirements will kick off? That is a bit uncertain at this point in time, because as you will see later on, the intention of the Belgian government is to also leverage the Peppol network for the e-reporting side of things as well. So that may have an impact going forward. So that is why we always advise our clients, be careful with this opt-out possibility and limit it to those cases that are really crucial for you. For the other transactions, it may be more beneficial to indeed go for the default track. Another point, and a question that I'm often receiving is, okay, what if we're not ready? What if we're not compliant with the upcoming regulations, especially knowing that the timeline is quite short if we look at where we are today? Well, there, of course, we have both a mixture of existing penalties, existing consequences that are already listed in the Belgian VAT code. Meaning proportional penalties, so the existing penalties for non-compliance, which can lead up to penalties of 100% of the VAT amount, so pretty significant in case you are not able to issue your invoice in line with the Belgian VAT code. But also a new non-proportional penalty, and that's also clarification that was given by the Royal Decree, will be included per infraction to the rules. I think what is also important from an AP side is that, of course, your input VAT deduction could be at risk in case you are not receiving compliant invoices, or in case you are processing, for instance, a PDF invoice where you should have received your invoice over the PEPL network for a transaction in scope of the mandate. So important to consider that one. Where are we today? Of course, the legislation does not fall just out of the sky. These things take time. And yeah, we basically have all the pieces of the puzzle available now, meaning we were waiting for that Royal Decree to be published. Like we expected, the Royal Decree did not include much more detail or things that are very much deviating from what we already knew as of now, unless the points that I made out earlier around, for instance, the consequences in case of non-compliance and the scope of the requirements. But aside from that, everything was already clear also before. And now it means that we have less than 5 months to prepare for the upcoming mandate. I often receive the question, but should we expect a delay, knowing that there are also in other jurisdictions typically delays or grace periods granted in a certain period in time in which no penalties will be imposed, for instance, for non-compliance. And I can only say that at this point in time, this is not really foreseen. So the Belgian government really likes to stick to the timeline that they've put forward, that 1st of January. Whether they will be relaxed the first couple of months, that may be a possibility, but there is no formal grace period granted or included at this point in time. So important that we indeed do as much as we can to prepare and be ready by 1st of January 2026. I talked about the phased approach already, and this slide visualizes a bit what is the short and long-term vision on e-invoicing and e-reporting. So phase 1, that is clear, 1st of January 2026, e-invoicing via PEPL, meaning the four-corner model. Dolf will explain that much more technically than I can in what follows. But basically, it means that you will, as a supplier, connect via your service provider, via an access point to the PEPL network, and that those access point providers will communicate with each other's invoices in the right format, which is in case of PEPL, the PEPL BIS format, exchange that document and deliver it towards the buyer and vice versa. So that is basically the phase 1 approach. What is the long-term vision on e-invoicing and e-reporting is that as from 2028, which is the current timing that is put forward, Belgium wants to add a 5th corner to that PEPL network, which will be basically the Belgian government, whereby your access point provider that you're using to exchange your invoice document in first instance will also be responsible to extract certain invoice information. What information that will be, that is not yet known at this point in time, whether it's the full invoice or just certain fields included on the invoice. But basically, they will extract the invoice information that the Belgian government wants to receive, and they are the ones responsible for exchanging that information with the fifth corner, the access point of the Belgian government in real time. And of course, you already see the possibilities for the Belgian government to cross-match the information that is coming from corner 2 and corner 3. And what we also typically see in countries that have developed a similar mechanism is that, of course, this information not only is being cross-matched, but it's also being cross-matched, for instance, with your VAT return. It leads to things like pre-filled VAT returns. So I think the options to use that data are really numerous. How far away is Belgium from this implementation? Well, they're currently already testing this model under the so-called PwC VIDA pilots. So they are preparing and they are hoping indeed to finalize the technical feasibility of this model with service providers, with end customers, with governments as well by the end of this year. So it can all go quite quickly, basically. And I think it's important when you're now looking at the design of your solution, when you're talking about the data quality, for instance, of the data that will flow through the Peppol network towards your buyer, that you also already consider this aspect, because tomorrow, 2028, this information will also go in real time towards the government. So of course you want to be very certain as a business that you have compliant data available, where now there is still a process possible of cleansing that data before posting it in your VAT return, for instance. With this type of model, that will unfortunately no longer be possible. So the power is really with the data to make sure that you have clear, compliant data available in your system. Why should you now strategically prepare for what is coming and not just consider this as a super easy process, not to overcomplicate things, of course. But as I just explained, there is a big impact from a VAT process perspective, from a systems perspective, from a data perspective. Your AP, your AR, but also your intercompany transactions will be affected. Intercompany is typically, when I talk to my clients, an aspect that is a bit forgotten. It's not really dealt with as of now, but as from January 26, these types of transactions will also fall in scope of the mandate. So all of that will be impacted. You may need to make changes to your current system environment. You may need to check for data availability, accuracy of your data, as I just explained. So all of that, of course, needs to be carefully considered. The broader organizational impact of all of this, an e-invoice or the invoice is really a crucial document. I talked about the consequences in case of non-compliance, but of course it's the basis for everything. It's the basis for your VAT deduction. It's the basis for audits that are being performed. It's the basis for accounting. So you need to be very sure about the process behind. And of course, think about the long-term vision as well. It's not just about making sure that you can connect to the Peppol network, that you can exchange documents there, but also think about the fact that in a few years' time, we will also move towards e-reporting. And I think if you do all of that very strategically, there are, of course, also a lot of positives linked to this process. Talk about cost savings linked to automation, efficiency, having cleaner data available in your system. So making sure that from a cash flow perspective, you have good visibility on where your invoices sit, when they will be paid. So all of that, of course, can lead to important cost savings as well, next to the fact, and that's what is mentioned at the bottom of this slide, that this could be the first step in a broader digital transformation process within your company. And that's also how, let's say, the government will be dealing with that. I talked about the fact that they will be using the data in a very smart way going forward. I think the options to cross-check the information with other types of reporting, with your VAT return, for instance, are really numerous. So I think that is definitely the future. And if you prepare for that properly now, you, of course, have a super competitive advantage as a business. So I think with that, Dolf, I almost finalized everything. What I wanted to say, I included in the slide deck, which I think will be shared with the audience. Also, some do's and don'ts in relation to how to prepare for this, what to consider, who should be responsible, because that's also often a question that I get. Where in the organization should this requirement sit? Is it with tax? Is it finance? Is it IT? So all of those aspects is basically linked here in or talked about in the slide deck, and I'm of course happy to answer any further questions that have been raised in the meantime. And I saw quite some action in the chat box, so that is nice to see.
Yes, thank you, Ellen. Yes, and I read through the questions, and some of them are, I think, best answered by you because you know the real specifics. So if you would be so kind to read through those,
I
please
will
do.
do so.
And it was very clear what you explained. One question I have, because I know that there are 1.2 million companies in Belgium, and do you know about the number of already registered companies on the Peppol network now?
I should check for the latest stats, Dolf, but what I can say is that it's way too low as to where we should be right now. So there is indeed a steep increase since the beginning of the year. So I think people are starting to realize, but we're nowhere near where we should be, knowing how many businesses should register on the Peppol network in the next couple of months. So still a lot of ground to cover.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, so I think the last numbers I saw were around 300,000, which of course is nearing 1/4 of the total. So I'm really curious what will happen, and also you talking about the fines. That's to be followed up. Okay. Thank you again, and I will present you a bit about Storecove. Storecove being a service provider. Meaning that we help companies connect to the Peppol network, and we help financial systems connect to the Peppol network, but also to the DBNA network. And DBNA is the North American Open Exchange Network. And just like with different telephone networks throughout the world, it's logical that in the near future also the Open Exchange networks for e-invoicing will work together as closely as they can. And so that's why we, in this first slide, show you a big wave. This is the wave of, on the one hand, the mandates, of course, mandates like Ellen explained per country that are being introduced, but also the wave of companies that need to adhere. So the wave also represents the number of companies that are coming towards us with all the questions on their specific needs. Ellen explained about the VIDA guideline. Here you see that 2030 is the final date of the VIDA guideline to be introduced. But some countries like Italy and, for instance, maybe Poland, because they have an old-fashioned system, will have some more years to adjust their system. And Italy, I know, has until 2035 to adjust their system. The four-corner network itself. So small explanation about this. So four-corner means you have a network, and on this network you have many service providers. I think Peppol at this moment has 440 service providers. DBNA has 39 service providers. And what these service providers do is they help senders, receivers, companies connect to the Open Exchange network. The real special thing about these Open Exchange network, if you compare them, to instance, with old EDI connections or closed networks, is the dynamic lookup. Meaning that you can, when you are registered to the network, ask the network based on the identifier, like a VAT number that you have put in the invoice. You can ask the network, is this identifier present? Is it registered? And if so, somewhere in the world, the receiving service provider, in the name of course, the receiver, the customer, will answer and will say, yes, it's with me, but will also tell about what capabilities, what sort of formats the receiver would like to receive. So that brings that both sender and receiver are automatically connected based on the identifiers that they both registered with on the network. but that also you receive messages like it was accepted or it was rejected, or even deeper responses like invoice responses like the invoice has been authorized, set for payment, or paid. And so the future of these open exchange networks is, on the one hand, efficiency, it's safety, but it's also about two-way communication. And like Ellen explained, the next step is the fifth corner to these networks, and the fifth corner is the tax authority. And that we see is the main driver for adoption in open exchange networks. For instance, in Malaysia, as we look at our company reports, the Storecove reports, we see that Malaysia, within our company, has the highest volume of all countries at the moment. And that's mainly due to the CTC mandate, the mandate of the tax authority. And this is why Belgium is such an interesting country to follow in the coming month, because this is not a CTC mandate, but it is a B2B mandate. It's a mandate to connect to the Peppol network, and it's effectuated, and there are fines. So it's really interesting to see what the uptake will be in means of volume. A bit about Storecove. We're in this area of e-invoicing over 10 years. I chair the US Open Exchange Network, so the DBNA network, but especially our CTO and the technical committee is really close with both the Peppol network and the DBNA network. And therewith, you could say front runner in the knowledge we have about both networks. Here you see an overview of the type of customers that we serve in the different areas of the world. So we have an office in Kuala Lumpur, in Netherlands, and New York. But here you see the type of customers are not only senders or receivers, but they are also, let's say, the in-between companies. So the ERP systems that offer both functions to companies that use their software. And so we connect senders, OCR, accounts payable, receivers, like you see here, ChargeBee, billing engines, but also direct companies. So it's logical. It's always an API that connects you to the network, and that brings that you can serve with two-way communication. To the right, you see the ISO certification, 27001. This is something that Storecove has as a certificate, but this is also something that Open Peppol will make mandatory in the near future. No exact timeline, but my expectation is that it will be 6 till 12 months until every service provider on the Peppol network needs to be ISO certified. So this really guarantees a sort of next level of security of your data. And which of course is important to bring this not only efficiency of the network, but especially the data security. We have our service in Dublin, Amazon, but for instance, for France, you need a local hosting provider, being a PDP in France, a certified service provider that's allowed to report to the tax authority, means that you need to host locally. And there again, we use a different hosting solution to adhere to the specific French regulations. I'm going through these slides very quickly, but of course, important for you to understand is that Belgium, until January 28, because then it's around CTC, but at this moment is purely a Peppol country. So receivers and senders need to be connected to the Peppol network, as all other registrants in Europe do. So it's not, technically, it's not a special thing that Belgium asks. The only special thing, of course, is that it's a mandate and they push towards 100% adoption. So that's why I'm explaining sort of a general slides here on how to connect to Peppol. Here, the USP that Storecove has. So most of our customers connect with what we call JSON data set. So a broad set of invoice data. When properly implemented, we can generate from that JSON data whichever format, invoice format you need. And so that means when you send to Belgium, it will be UBL 2.1, this 3.0. But if you send to the US, it will be UBL 2.3, and Japan, it will be JP-PINT. And so we always generate the format that the receiver can automatically process. That is one type of connection, but you can also ingest formats that you already have, like UBL or CII, but that limits you to the data that's within that invoice. So we advise to connect with JSON data, because that doesn't only cause that you can generate special invoices per country, but also tax authorities that want subsets of that data are to be produced from that same JSON set. So with this, you're compliant for countries where you need to do reporting, like Romania and Italy and Poland now, but also upcoming reporting countries, CTC countries, and there will be more, as you heard about the VIDA pilot that's happening in Europe at the moment. You are also ready for other VIDA countries, other CTC countries, because there again, we generate the subset of data that new specific tax authority wants to receive. And so that brings that with this one connection, technically you're ready for global e-invoicing and for reporting in the upcoming CTC countries. So you're VIDA compliant. Here you see the CTC countries that we cover at the moment. I explained about Malaysia, where there's a real strict mandate and there's a high volume. Singapore also being high volume country. But of course, Belgium will also introduce a CTC mandate 1st of January 28. And so it's an interesting two-step approach that Belgium is following. What we this quarter will add as other countries for CTC is the United Arab Emirates. We're adding Mexico to this list, and we're adding a closed network called Nemhandel in Denmark. And based on the questions, the requests of our customers, we add more CTC countries. And so the countries that are being asked for the most are the countries that we connect next. And I know that Slovakia is a really interesting country because they will introduce PEPL and reporting. But PEPL is also working on authorities in countries like South Korea, Taiwan, South Africa, and Nigeria. And so there's really a lot happening in the area of CTC reporting. And that is what we are following as a service provider. Here you see the countries that we support behind the API. So connecting to our API means that these are countries that you support. And it's both sending and receiving that we do. So depends, of course, on the department within the company, which direction you want to start with first, or it depends on a tender that you win, that you have to adhere to e-invoicing via PEPL, or a large customer asking for it. It's always a reason that brings that companies connect to the PEPL network. To be frank, it doesn't happen a lot that the company is just visionary and that they say, oh, it's so efficient, I want to start with e-invoicing now. It's mainly a mandate that pushes company to start, or a large customer or supplier. Here you see the flow for sending, and this looks a bit technical, but actually it's quite a logical flow. So here you see the financial system you want to connect. You generate a sales invoice. Here is that JSON data that we convert to the sales invoice. But based on the location of the entity, and this was one of the questions in the slide, the question overview. Based on the location of the entity, you probably might need to report. So what we do is first check if, based on the location of the entity, so it might be, for instance, a sender in Romania, then you need to report. That means that we send the invoice or a subset of the data to the tax authority, we receive a certificate, and with that certificate, you can deliver the invoice over the exchange network. And what actually makes this loop even more closed is the fact that in most situations, the receiver that receives an invoice without a certificate from the tax authority can't deduct the taxes. And so that this is really a strong push, not only for the sender, but also for the receiver to make sure that they adhere to the local tax rules. And in case we can't deliver via an open exchange network, meaning that the recipient isn't on the network or doesn't answer, alternatively, we can send via email. But here in the email, you see names like Zugpferd, which is a hybrid format in Germany that we support, where PDF with XML included is then also added to the email, so that you make sure that the invoice can always be processed, no matter what type of invoice the receiver wants to receive. Here you see the archiving API, meaning that, as I explained, on the fly, we generate a specific format that the receiver wants to receive. And then the archiving API brings that you can retrieve that invoice and archive it in your own ERP system. And this makes sure that you adhere to the local compliance rules. And so you can store, archive the invoices like you delivered them in the format that you delivered them. This is for receiving. Actually, it's the same setup as you see, but the other way around. The only difference here is how you can receive invoices, of course, via the network or via email. But in some countries, like in Italy or in Poland, you could receive the invoice from the tax authority, because in those countries, it's the tax authority that, in the name of the sender, sends the invoice to the receiver. So that's why you can also receive from a tax authority. And here you see it's a purchase invoice via the API. We then again generate that JSON data set, and that ends up in your ERP system as a processable format. And this connection could also be other than JSON, so we could generate other formats, but again, most flexible is that JSON format. And here again, you see an archiving API, but here this API means that you can retrieve the document in the format that was originally sent to you. Because again, here we transform via JSON data to the format that your ERP system can receive, but also to be compliant, you want to store and archive the documents like it was sent to you. So this is what the archiving API means here. We work together with a company in UK called VetCalc, and this company focuses on tax filing and the tax determination. And so the specific tax percentages for different products or certain services, and then added to the invoice. This is a service we have combined in the same technical API connection. And to be clear, if you're interested in this service, I can advise you to contact VetCalc, or you can ask me for the contact details, because the setup of all these rules you do together with VetCalc. So it's cooperation included in the same technical connection, but the setup you do with VetCalc themselves. Here you see that same flow. So for tax filing, tax determination, they have an auditor service included. So mostly this is for larger companies, but if it's applicable to you, or because it's good to know that VetCalc is a group of old Avalara employees who said, well, this process can be much further automated. So I think if you want to hear more about VetCalc, please contact them directly. This is the final slide. So here you see connecting to the API, and of course now we return to Belgium, means that you're ready both on the sending and the receiving side. And this is what the mandate prescribes. You as a company need to be connected in both directions, sending and receiving. This is what our API offers. And you see we're quite flexible in the format that you can ingest. I talked about the JSON, but also UBL and CII format can be processed. We can generate the Zugpferd format for Germany. For France, it would be Factor X, which is also a hybrid format. And to the right, you see the CTC countries that are included in the packages that we offer. Packages are, let's say, based on the number of entities that you want to connect and the yearly invoice volume. So those are the two metrics that we ask from our customers to understand what they need and to explain if our solution is suitable. And a solution or a service provider is suitable as long as you cover all the countries, of course, that a certain company needs. And so here you see the countries that we cover at this moment. But it might be that you need Brazil, and Brazil is not yet on our CTC list. So then for Brazil, you might need a local provider to cover that need. VIDA ready means that from that same data, we can generate a subset for tax authorities now, but also tax authorities that will start in the future. I think it's quite an interesting overview to be able to give you. I think, Ellen, you were fantastic again in your presentation, so thank you so much. As said in the chat, we will send the video to you, and we will send the presentation to you. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you will all be ready on time. We have, more than a quarter to go, so I'm sure together we will make sure that all companies that want to be ready will be ready. Ellen, is there anything more you would like to say?
No, nothing in addition. So thanks again for having me. If there would be any open questions, I answered, I think, many of the questions in the chat, but do feel free to reach out in case there is something left unanswered. And well, thank you to you, Dolf, for the kind invitation to the webinar today.
Thank you so much. Okay, thanks everyone, and hope to see you or speak to you later at one of the conferences. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.